Buenas. This is episode 5 of You Live Where. My name is Diego and I've been an expat for 10 years now. Greatest 10 years ever. I know that there's a lot of people who would like to live or do something similar to what I'm doing. So the way that I can provide value to you is by having conversations with expats, people who own homes overseas, or people who've been on the road for a really long time. Today we're going to be speaking with Ms.Mona. She lives in Brazil. It's a great interview, very informative, and enjoy.
Hey, what's up? How you
Hey,
doing?
I'm good. How are you?
It's a pleasure to have you on the show, man. This is really cool. I'm excited to
For
talk to
having
you.
me. Thanks for having me.
Word. All right, so let's jump into it, man.
For sure.
How did the whole idea, the concept come up for fuck it, I'm just gonna go live somewhere else. I'm gonna try this out. When did you get that inspiration?
I don't think that was ever like an intention. It just sort of happened. But I don't think that I was ever closed to the idea of living somewhere else. I've had a little bit of an eccentric life. So I'm kind of a little bit of like I go where the wind takes me, or like I'm open to just possibilities of life. So I think that was something that, yeah, it was always like, oh, maybe one day, like if the opportunity presents itself. But it was really wasn't until I took like a year sabbatical to travel, and I was so burnt out that I just needed to like be away from everything, and I just needed like different things and just time for myself and to figure some shit out. And yeah, and then I wound up coming to Brazil, and I really liked it, and I kept coming back, and then I had the opportunity to move here, so I figured why not.
Holy shit, Brazil. Wow, that's pretty far. Uh,
Yeah.
what was that like? Tell me, like, would you pack everything up and go? How was that move? Was it difficult for
No,
you?
not even. It was, how do I like, okay, so when I took that year off to travel, I decided like, I don't know, like, so I was living in New York, and I got priced out of my apartment, and I just needed a break from New York. I had been living there for on and off for 18 years, and it was enough for me at that point. So I took a year off, and I decided that I did want to travel in South America. And I started in Argentina, and I was just kind of bopping around, and I had no real plans of what I was going to do. I was like volunteering in some places, and you know, um, just kind of, yeah, just like traveling around. I had no particular plan to go to Brazil, but just so happened with the timing that it was more winter time in South America, and I was chasing beaches and warmth. So I wound up deciding like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go to Brazil then. And I traveled the coast for like a month. So I took a bus from Montevideo in Uruguay to Porto Alegre, no, in Brazil, and traveled the coast pretty much on bus all the way to Salvador. And yeah, when I got to Salvador, I feel like I had gotten the the vibe of Brazil. Like I was feeling like more confident in myself about being in Brazil, and like, figuring out how like kind of things work. And because Brazil's very different from anywhere else that I've been in South America. And, a lot of people from South America say that like Brazil is like its own animal. So that's a
Well,
whole
all right. So,
other.
well, no, I mean, come on. How is it a whole other? Well, obviously it struck you. It felt like home, right? It captivated you when you got there. So let's start there. What do you think that was? It just a vibe, like you said, or was it?
Yeah, it's just like I actually don't know how to explain how Brazil is in comparison to other South American countries. Like I can only say like, oh, if you've been to Argentina, you kind of get the vibe of Uruguay. Or if you've been to Peru, like maybe like, the countries that are closer to Peru kind of have like the vibe more of Peru. Brazil is just Brazil. I don't know how to explain it. It's just completely different. And I remember um, I had booked an Airbnb for when I first got here, and I was renting a room in this woman's apartment, and she spoke English. So that was great. And so I was able to like communicate with her really, really well. And so she kind of gave me like the breakdown. Like I had to go get a SIM card for my phone and stuff. So she took me to the mall to get my SIM card and all this stuff. And I remember just sitting in the mall waiting for her to run into her store to do whatever she was doing. And I was just like, oh, I'm just going to sit out here on the bench, whatever. And I'm hearing everybody talking. And now, mind you, I was just getting used to Spanish, and now I'm hearing everything in Portuguese. And I honestly couldn't tell you if I had really like, I'm sure I had heard Portuguese before, like living in New York, you hear every language, but I would never be able to say like, oh, they're speaking Portuguese. Now, when I go home and I'm on the metro, the subway and all that, I'm like, oh, I know what they're saying. Or like, it's really interesting. But I just remember like hearing the language and like, oh my God, it sounds like a record being played backwards. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's going on. It's just very different. And I mean, Brazil's a massive country, as we know. And even just traveling just the coast, like I have never even really been like that inland to the other states. So I mean, I guess it's comparable to any other big country. Like all the states are different. Everything's a little bit different. The South is different from the North, so it was just, yeah, it was an experience. It was an experience. And I feel like, again, when I made it to Salvador, I had kind of gotten in the vibe a little bit more of like the flow of the country. So, and Salvador is in the state of Bahia, and Bahia is also very different from other parts of the country in general. Here, it was the first colonized capital of Brazil, and in Salvador particularly, and it also has the largest population of Afro-Brazilian people in the country. So like the food is different, the culture is different. It's like Bahia is like almost like its own little world in Brazil too. It's really interesting.
All right. Okay. So back to the
Oh,
language.
so
Go ahead. Go
oh
ahead.
yeah. But back to what you asked me with the move. So what happened was that I got to Bahia and I really, really liked it, or to Salvador, and I really, really liked it. And then I still had like everything in storage. I had gotten rid of my apartment and I was just like bouncing around staying with family, like anytime I had went back to the States. But I kept coming back here to Salvador because I had made some friends and we did stay in touch. And again, it's always warm here. The beaches are amazing. So I just kept coming back, and I was coming back on a tourist visa. So I was staying 6 months out of the year, and then I was going back for 6 months, and then I was coming back for 6 months. So I did that for a while until the opportunity arose that I could get my permanent visa. And then so I moved here on my permanent visa, but I didn't pack anything up. And that was actually, I messed up on that. I really messed up on that.
How'd you mess up on that?
So I came with just suitcases, and and I didn't have the money to ship all my stuff at that time. So it was just like, even if that, like, knowing now what I should have known then, even
Hindsight.
if that was a thing, hindsight, exactly. Like I didn't even think to like look online or like to find out like why it's like this or whatever. But so I found out moving to Brazil, once you move here, you have 6 months to send your stuff if you're going to do like a container or whatever. And then after that, nothing.
Really?
You're not allowed. Yeah. Like your container will get to port and nothing will get through.
Holy shit. So that's good to know. That's fucking
I
dropping
had no
jewels.
idea. I was like, what am I
Dropping
going to
jewels.
do? So yeah, so that was a thing. That was a thing. But yeah, so,
But you could pretty much find everything in Brazil that you could find in New York. I mean, well, in the United States. Yeah, all right, my bad. But I'm saying like you could basically get what you need, right? Like all your shit, you could get
yeah, I
everything.
mean, all your household stuff. I mean, like I wouldn't have shipped that stuff anyway. That just doesn't make sense. Like I would have just shipped like, my sentimental things and my personal things.
Okay.
And again, if you're shipping that kind of stuff anyway, there's a chance that it's not going to get through, or there's a chance that it's going to get confiscated, or you're going to have to pay a ridiculous amount of money to import that stuff. So to me, that just didn't make sense. But like like I have like art and that were like gifts to my friends and things like that, like sentimental things that I've had to start bringing over, like just in my luggage, or having friends that are going to come visit me.
I
I'm like,
feel
oh, go
that
to my
struggle.
cousin's house, grab this box. Yeah, you know how it
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so that was the thing. That was my first, well, not my first shock, but that was a big shock of like, okay, I have to rethink of how that's going to work. And
All right.
you know
Okay. All right. So how are you doing with the language? What's going on? You speaking Portuguese?
sim, eu falo português. Se eu vou morar aqui, tem que falar, né? Então,
Word.
yeah, I mean, do as I say, not as I do. Again, I never necessarily, well, up until like I started coming here on a regular basis every year and spending, a large amount of time, I wasn't really like, oh yeah, Brazil's going to be where I'm going to be. So I didn't study anything when I first showed up here, like all I
Yeah.
knew was obrigada, and I was even saying it wrong because I was saying the guy's version. I was like obrigado and I'm like whatever. But the one thing that I find a majority of the people here, they they will to as much as they can like work with you and trying to figure out like what it is
Okay.
that you need
Dope.
or what it is that you're trying to say. um People are usually pretty cool about it, but the other thing that I find really endearing is a lot of people want to speak English with me.
Okay. Okay. I
So
see. I get that.
they
They
might
want to
know like,
practice.
yeah, they
You're
might
the
know like
foreigner.
five. Yeah, like they might know like 5 words, but they're like, hello. And it's like a big thing. And it's a big thing for them. And I'm like, and I love that. You know what I mean? I love that they're like, like, oh, I know these couple of words. Can I say them with you? I'm like, hell yeah. And then I'm like, oh, I'm learning too. Can you correct me? So it's actually really funny. Like the way I speak, I would say is completely wrong. Is, well, not
Nah,
completely
dude.
wrong.
Nah. Yeah.
It's not
Anytime you hear somebody with an accent, it shows that they have strength because they're trying, they're working, they're figuring out a new
yeah,
language, and they're attempting to do that in public. So I don't think of it like, yeah,
yeah,
you're doing it right, no matter which way you're doing it.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not maybe the grammatically correct way, but I think one of the things that I do is like I still think in the sentence structures in English, and then I translate that in my head, and then I have to think about like what words do I know that are close to these words in Portuguese to be able to convey whatever it is that I'm trying to convey. Um, so so yeah, I pretty much just learned just being here and just listening to people, and especially when I didn't speak at all I could do was listen. So, but the other thing is that's really interesting too is just as much as like New York has its slang, Cali has its slang.
Oh
In
yeah.
New York we say, "Oh, that was mad crazy." In New York, in Cali, you say, "Oh, that was hella crazy." You know what I mean? Like there's a saying in Brazil that if you live in Bahia, you speak Baianese. And
Okay.
Baianese is very different from how like people from Sao Paulo talk. And even with like their accent and everything, again, it's a big country. It's very different. So anywhere you go, they're gonna speak a little bit differently with like a different, and they're gonna use different words too, words that are more popular in one area might be less popular in another area. So it's not even just about learning like the language of Brazilian Portuguese. You have to learn the slang and the gírias where you're living.
All right. Word. Um, any misconceptions about the country that when you got there kind of like cracked? Oh, that's not how it is, or that's how it is, or anything like that?
I'm
Anything that
not
you
the
thought of
type.
going into it that
Right. I
changed?
mean, I had no expectations. Again, I
Okay.
wasn't planning on coming here. It just sort of, that's where the wind took me, and that's what happened. But I think a lot of like I'm not that type of person, not that I've traveled like super extensively, but before I traveled in South America, I had, gone to Asia. I had um been to a couple places in Europe. And I think my whole thing, especially being from New York too, and being around so many cultures all the time, in the neighborhoods that I lived in New York, like I lived in a very Caribbean neighborhood. I used to live in Flatbush, which is very different now than it used to be. And I used to live in Sunset Park, which was very Hispanic with all kinds of Latinos. And so I was used to being around like different cultures, you know? So coming to other countries, I'm just like, what do you got?
Yeah. All right. Cool.
You know, so I didn't really have, I don't know, I just know the beaches were dope and the people are gorgeous and really hospitable. So that, I mean, that's
That's the
exactly what it was
checklist.
for me.
Right.
Yeah.
So all right. So the social life thing, has that been hard for you? Has it been easy? I mean, meeting people, getting to know people, making friends? I know the people you said the country's really dope. So how's it
Yeah.
been?
Um, well, I think I need to come at this, like, I need to preface this by saying that one, I'm a bit of an introvert.
Okay.
So I'm not like super social. And like I can go to things by myself and be totally fine. Like I can go to a concert by myself and like have a blast. You know what I mean? Like I don't necessarily need to be with a group of people or go like make friends there. And also I think that, you know, I'm in my 40s now. So no matter where you move at after a certain age, it's harder to make
Okay.
friends. Like, I think that's just a challenge that anybody faces
In
later
our
in
age group.
life.
Okay.
Yeah, in our age group. But again, not being a super outgoing person, I think it was one of those things of like, yeah, I just had to be patient. You know, I can honestly say I've never been homesick for like the States. I've just been homesick for like my people, like my friends, because, you know, I have certain interests and things like that. Oh, and that's another thing too, is like, you know, if you, yeah, you can make friends out here fairly easily, but you're trying to find like people like within your interests. So to find events that are within your interests, you have to know where to look. And I think that's actually the hardest part is, yeah, you can make friends, but are they going to be like the type of friends that, you know, maybe you just go out to dinner? Like, are they going to be more casual friends, or are they going to be friends that are like really into the things that you're into and have the same, I don't know, like, yeah, just interests or whatever. So
Okay.
I think that's something that anybody should do, whether they're moving to a different state or a different country, is to try to find the things that you're interested in and trying to find the communities there. And it'll be a lot easier than
Okay.
as opposed to like, oh, just trying to make friends with your neighbor. Like, you know, yeah, my neighbor might be a nice my
Yeah.
neighbor might be a nice person and they might not be cool, but we might not have anything in common. So
Uh,
our friendship is only going to go so far, you know.
right, right.
Yeah,
How about work? Do you work?
I do.
Uh,
And I
how was that? Was it hard finding a job? Is the structure of like how it works, bureaucracy wise, is it all the same shit? You're standing by like
oof,
a water
no.
cooler?
So no, I work from home. I have a virtual assistant job. I am extremely privileged because I do live here. I work my own hours. I have my own clients, and I make US dollars. I am extremely privileged living here and being able to do that. Now, mind you, um, I pretty much kind of work part time, but that was also coming to the realization that I realized that I wanted to spend this time of my life in Brazil is because of the fact that, well, one, I got priced out of my apartment in Brooklyn. That was another reason why I was just like, okay, you know,
I
things
need
were
that year.
mounting and I was just like, I gotta go. Like, I'm getting priced out of my apartment anyway. Like, this is a sign. I'm just gonna go do this. Um, so, you know, and I would work like sometimes I was working up to like four jobs, you know, but that was again, like I could have worked like a crazy 9 to 5 that killed me, or I could have had all these little jobs that at least I was interested in um, and, you know, making my living like okay with that. So again, I'm extremely privileged being here. And I think that was another catalyst to me choosing to move here full time, was because, yeah, I just want to work part time. Like, I don't want to kill myself anymore. I don't want to kill myself anymore. And mind you, like, I don't live extravagantly here. I still live very much the way I live when I was in the United States. And one of the things that I think is hardest for people that are particularly in my type of situation, when you make US dollars in a country that the dollar goes far, you still think in dollar. And everything seems so cheap when it's not. And I also have to remind myself, like, I don't make the money that I used to make when I lived in New York. Obviously, I was spending a lot more of it just to survive, but I'm making significantly less. Like, there's no way I could live in New York ever again. I don't even know if there's, I don't even know what state I would be able to live in, the amount of money that I make now. No, I'm being so serious.
No, believe me, I hear you. I
you
hear
know
you. I know.
but the thing is that, like, I have to check myself a lot. Like, if I'm looking to buy something that is like, yeah, because this is one of the things that's also weird too. It's just like, well, where do I buy certain things? Like, I wanted to like dye some clothes that were like old and grungy. I'm like, I just want to get black clothes dye. Where do I buy that? I have to call my friend. I'm like, where do I buy clothes dye here, or dye for,
Mhm.
like, to dye material here?
Yeah, just
And
day to
he's like,
day
oh,
shit,
you got,
figuring it out.
yeah, like day to day shit, like, and like I remember I was going to this one particular supermarket here all the time, and we've gotten hit with inflation here
Okay.
for sure. I don't know if you're feeling that in Nicaragua, but
Everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world, it's
okay.
fucking ridiculous right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
rice and
So
beans jumped on us, and that's a national product. Like shit got real for us here. Yeah,
same, the rice here is like, cheese, like it's yeah,
yeah,
it's
shit jumped.
I remember when I wasn't living here permanently before the pandemic, but I remember I could go food shopping for a week for two people, almost 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, for like $40.
Sure.
Can't do that anymore. It's like at least doubled. Um, so yeah, but there's like certain things of like, if I want to buy something that I'm like, oh, this seems reasonably cheap, but then I ask my friend and they're like, I always have to ask my friends. And I'm like, what do you think about this price and that? I was like, oh, that's so expensive. What are you doing? And I'm like, oh, okay. They're like, no, 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 go here. I'm like, yeah, I had to find the right supermarket to go shopping in, because the one that I was going to, that was right down the street from me. I'm like, oh yeah, this seems reasonable. And my friends are like, oh my God, that supermarket is so expensive. What are you doing? You got to go to the SI. I was
What is
like,
that? That's like the
oh,
Wegmans up north by us. Were you shopping at the Wegmans? We got the Pathmark shop right down the street type deals that they were telling you.
no, I'm actually going to Aldi.
Yeah,
I'm
that's what I'm
actually going to
saying.
Aldi now. Yeah, I'm going to Aldi and Costco and
All
stuff
right.
like that. So
Word,
yeah,
word.
but I was going to like Whole Foods, and then and now I'm in Aldi. Thank God.
So you're
So
figuring it out though. You've gotten in your flow. You've got your supermarkets. You've got your day to day.
exactly.
Everything's mapped out. You know where
Yeah,
to get your shit. But how long you think that
yeah.
took you?
You know,
Or it's just an ongoing thing that never really stops?
it's an ongoing thing that never really stops. It really is.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things of yeah, things are just different, and you just have to figure it out. And the one thing that, like right now, the one thing that I am figuring out is health insurance.
Well, that was my next question. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a you got to take care of yourself. I'm sure you're going to get sick. You got to figure shit out. How's the health?
yeah.
How are you doing that? How's that working for you? Health insurance, hospital. Is that something you're looking into? I know you said you're looking into it now, but
So
how's the
yeah,
hospital
yeah,
care? Is it expensive? Oh, hey, healthcare,
yes.
man. How's that going? What's going on there?
So the healthcare situation is, we do have national healthcare here, and it works ish.
Okay.
I did have a situation. So most of my doctors are still in the United States, but I did have a situation recently where I realized, I was like, my life is here. I need to stop. I need to like let that go and get my doctor situation set up here. I go to the dentist or whatever, but I by majority, and thankfully I'm a person in good health. But the majority of my healthcare, I still get taken care of in the United States when I go back to visit. Um, so I did have a situation where I hurt my hand and I went to the hospital here, and they did see me, and they did take care of me and all that. But I got very basic care, and unfortunately, like, I needed continuing care for that situation. So I tried to go through the healthcare system to go see an orthopedist, and it was really hard to get an appointment. And it's one of
And
those
that's
things
public.
where
You're saying that's the
that's
public
that's
healthcare
public.
system?
That's the public healthcare system. There
Okay.
is a national healthcare
Yeah,
system. It's
that's okay.
SUS.
Okay.
Yeah, it's SUS. So again, being again that I have the privilege to be able to afford to pay for health insurance here. If you can have health insurance here, I strongly suggest that you get health insurance here because, like, for example, say like my appendix burst, right? And I needed to go to the hospital right away. Maybe I would go to a hospital that's in the SUS um, umbrella,
Right,
right?
right.
They might not have any beds for me.
Okay.
I could get turned away just because they're overcrowded, or, and like, again, you're in this emergency situation. So every minute counts. And like, I might have to drive around the city in an Uber, like trying to
Right.
find a hospital to go to. Like, so it's, it's there, but it's difficult. It's difficult. And especially when you have like an emergency situation or something that is going to need various appointments for to look after or follow up on. I think the best thing to do is to get health insurance. So I am trying to figure out that process now.
Okay. Word. Um, so do you have any standout moments? Do you ever just stop, look around and be like, holy shit, this is my life? Like,
Every,
wow.
no, I still feel like I'm on vacation. I still
Like
feel
it's
like
still a
I'm on
dream?
vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still feel like I'm on vacation. Again, the weather is great here, which that really helps me. Um, and I live right up the block from the beach. And it's one of my favorite beaches in the city. Um, the music here is amazing. Like, I go to some really, really good shows, and just that in itself, like, the music is just beautiful. And and that's another thing too, is like, again, I was a club kid in New York, and I like to go to my parties and things like that. And the scene has changed so much. Like, nobody dances anymore. When I go out, I want to dance, and it's like, samba's really, really heavy here in Salvador right now. And so there's like a samba event every night. And like, even though I can't samba for shit, I still love to go, and like, the music's amazing, and just to watch the people dance. And yeah, and I think that part of just like people getting up and dancing and being present, and like, I really, really like that. But yeah, like, the sunset here, incredible. Like, there's various places in the city that you can go watch the sunset at, and like, people gather to watch the sunset, and when the sun goes down, everybody's clapping, and it's just, yeah. And the sunsets are beautiful, beautiful.
Oh, dope. All right. And I guess my last question, man. Um, if somebody's looking to do what you're doing, they're thinking about it, fucking,
Mhm.
I'm gonna leave the States, or they're gonna leave wherever, and they're gonna try Brazil or wherever they're gonna go. Give it to them. What's your advice?
Visit there first. Definitely visit there first, because that's another thing too. Like I said, especially if you're going to a big country, everywhere is different. You know what I mean? Like, you might go to one place in Brazil and be like, I appreciate Sao Paulo for what it is, but I would never want to live in Sao Paulo,
Okay.
because Sao Paulo is like the New York of Brazil. I would say Salvador is like the Miami of Brazil, and Rio is like the Los Angeles. So Sao Paulo, it's it's completely different from Salvador. So if you're like, oh, I want to go somewhere, yeah, like, let me go check out Sao Paulo. Like, you might not like it there. It might not have like the Brazil you're looking for. So travel in the country that you're thinking of to see different areas, and one area might stand out where others weren't really like grabbing you. So that's another thing too. Yeah, learn the language.
All
Learn
right.
the language, at least get some basics down, learn the language. Look into things like the healthcare system. Do the research that I did not do. Again, do as I say, not as I do. Look into what it is to, like, if you are going to move stuff there, how you're going to do that. Look into the healthcare system, the banking system too. So like what bank you want to use and things like that, because you are going to need, even though I do still do a lot of things from my US bank account, I do need a bank account here, and so it took me a while to figure out which one I wanted. And one of the other things too is like, be with the locals. Just be with the locals. Like, I know a few people that I've talked to that, not just that live here but in other countries, like there's always like an expat kind of group somewhere. I have one expat friend that I just met recently. All my friends are from here.
Right.
Like, and that to me makes a huge difference. Unless this person's been, I mean, and even if sometimes this person, this other expat that you're friendly with has been living there for however many years or whatever, there's still nothing like learning the insights from the locals, and hearing about what their life is really like. And another thing too is, I would say, listen as much as you can, because I've had situations where, I'm sitting and I'm talking with people, and a lot of people outside of the United States have an idea of what the United States is like. And
they give out Mercedes. Everybody drives a
yeah, you know
Mercedes
what I
in the
mean?
United
Like,
States.
exactly. And although, like, I can say, like, Brazil actually mirrors a lot of the United States in a lot of ways. But I would say but I would say here it's to a more extreme, like, especially like the classes and things like that. Like, we're losing the middle class in the United States, but there is very little middle class in Brazil. It's, you're either poor or you're super rich. There is very little middle class. So that gap is massive. And listening to people, like, I wouldn't want to say that I would get, I always felt like I kind of needed to say something, like if we were in a group of people and people were talking about, like, their struggles and stuff here, and then they would talk about, like, oh, in the United States, blah, 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 blah. Like, I would always kind of feel the need to be like, but it's not really though. Like, it's the same, but different. And now I've kind of learned to just like, shut up, because you know what? There is no, there, like, you can't compare struggles. You know what I mean? And I've also learned that with time, like, just me sharing like random stories about, like, oh, like right now I have an issue with my credit card, and I'm fighting with my credit card company in the United States. And my friend was here the other day, and I was like, just venting about it. And I'm like, I'm on the phone with my bank and blah, blah, blah. And he was like kind of shocked to see like all the bullshit that I was going through, like assuming that
Like
things are
the
so
same
much more.
bullshit he's got to go through, what he deals with.
Yeah,
Right?
like the things that are like much more fluid and or easier to resolve in the United States. Like, I've had various conversations, like even when I was getting my documents from the United States for my immigration here, I had more problems on the US side than I had on the Brazilian side. And I remember, my friend was asking me like how the whole process was going, and I was super stressed out because I was getting the runaround from the US, and I'm telling her the story, and she was just like, she was shocked. She was just like, oh, I just assumed everything in the US is like blah, 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 blah. And, and everybody bitches about like the healthcare and stuff here too. And then, they asked me, well, how is the healthcare in the US? And again, like, not me chiming in and being like, well, in the US it's worse and blah, blah, blah. No, I'm just like, oh, well, it's like this. And they're like shocked. They're like, oh, wow, we didn't realize it was that bad. And I'm like, yeah, so it's one of those things of like, because
I think the world
I
got
don't know.
struck. I think the world got struck with the USA in the 80s. And they still believe, like even
Exactly.
today, that United States dream from the
Exactly.
70s and the 80s is alive, and it's just
Or
fucking not.
from the 50s and the 60s
Yeah, the
and
whole
all of
idea
that
is
stuff,
anybody could
you
go
know?
there and you can become wealthy and all this shit. You work hard and you get
Exactly.
stuff and it's all great. And it's just not,
Exactly.
it hasn't been that
And
since like
it's
the late
yeah,
80s. Yeah, you know what I mean?
all
Mid
the people
90s.
that know is, what they see in films and
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. And I understand that, but I think that's another thing too, is just like just listen to people and whatever you have to add to like their stories or the conversation will come in time. Like don't try to correct people when they're like, oh, I don't know, when they're having like their moment and thinking about this, or venting about whatever struggles that they're having where you guys are. It's like, no, because all their stuff is valid just as much as like, if they want to have that conversation with me, they'll have that conversation with me. Because I've gotten side eye a couple of times of me being like, it's not like you think it is, and they're just like, girl, but it's not as bad as it is here. And I'm like, you're right. But you know, um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's another thing of just be patient. You have to be patient, and you have to also realize that it's a lot of work. Just like moving to another state, just
It is
like
a lot
moving
of
to
work.
another state is a lot of work. Setting up, you find your apartment, and like you gotta get your new doctors, and if you have to change banks, and like that might take you like a couple of months to do. But it's way more work doing it in another country, and especially if you're just learning the language, or especially if you don't know how the systems work here and things like that. Again, you're always learning, which is great. And also it can be hard at times. It can be very tiring, like even just really immersing yourself in another language. Like sometimes I'm like, oh my god, I just want to speak English. Like I just want to be able to like say this simple thing without having to do like this, puzzle in my head of like figuring out like what it is. But you know what? Everything comes with time.
So
And
there's been studies done about people who are bilingual, or when you could speak two languages, that when you
right,
are in that language, you're a completely different personality. You're a different person. So like for me, example, I'm bilingual, as you know. There's jokes and sayings and punchlines that I have, or my vernacular, or my just the way that I my vocabulary, certain ways and punchlines that we have in English that don't exist in
right,
Spanish. That if I were to try to use that in
right,
Spanish, I'd look like a fucking clown, or it would just come off wrong. So you
right.
have to adopt an entirely different way of handling that. You know what I'm saying? So yeah,
Yeah,
it gets frustrating because sometimes I'm trying to articulate something to my friends and it's fucking funny, and you know what I mean? And I'm trying to be, and
yeah,
it's falling flat, and I'm like, ah, fuck this. You know what I mean? So I feel you. Yeah,
yeah. No, that's definitely true.
I
Yeah, and
feel
I
you.
think that I think that's the other thing too, of like making friendships and stuff like that. And again, when you're first learning a language, um, yeah, it is like part of your personality is hidden because you don't know how to express your funny side, or necessarily your creative side or your playful side. Like you're very limited until you again you learn the area, you learn the slang, you learn like, okay, if I wanted to say this in English, how would I translate that in Portuguese or whatever other language? Like there's always a way,
Right, right.
but you just have to learn again, like the speak for that area. So I think that's really a thing too, you know.
Word. So look, man, yo, I wish you all the best, dude. Thank you so much for talking to us, man. You were
No
fucking dropping
problem.
jewels today. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
So I got.
Word. Thanks.
That was a dope interview. Mona, thank you so much for your time. Sending you a ton of positive vibes. I hope everything works out for you. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed this episode, give me a like, give me a subscribe, and if you have any questions that you want me to ask my future guests, just put it in the comments section. I'll get to it. See you in 2 weeks.